Capturing the sun's secret power, the mind-blowing science of solar wind energy. Do you know what's keeping wind and solar power from taking over the electric grid entirely? Well, for starters, the sun only shines during the day. The wind blows intermittently, is seasonally variable, and is not always blowing when the energy is needed. But you might think, what if solar and wind worked together? In a rush to find fossil fuels replacement as the next cheap and plentiful energy source for powering the human machine, wind gets a lot of attention. After all, it's certainly in no small supply, except when you need it to get a kite airborne. And the idea of continuous zero pollution energy is too enticing to ignore. Oh, and there's the fact that humanity burns through about 400 quadrillions of British thermal units annually. 400 quadrillion doesn't sound like an actual number, but consider that a single BTU is about as much energy generated by a lit match, which may help put it into perspective. Wind has been earning its keep. We've used it for centuries to mill grains, power ships, and even generate electricity starting in the 1930s. But as energy demand climbs, so have efforts to turn wind into a better option for large-scale electricity production. Wind turbines, in particular, are what people think of when discussing wind power. The turbines can measure more than 400 feet tall and weigh close to 400 tons. So, how does it work? Wind power is collected using wind turbines. They are classified into two general types, horizontal axis and vertical axis. Let's look at horizontal axis wind turbines, which are the most common. These massive wind turbines can be as tall as a 20-story building. They usually consist of three main components. First, they have three large blades, usually measuring 200 feet in length, which collect the air and begin to turn as it passes by. Second, the blades are connected to a shaft inside the turbine. As the wind rotates the blades, it turns the internal shaft. Lastly, the shaft spins the generator, which is ultimately used to produce electricity. Windmills, the first form of wind power, were used centuries ago for tasks like grounding grain and pumping water. Wind energy is also used in the world of transportation. The Netherlands, located in northwest Europe, is known for its windmills and flat landscape. A few enterprising renewable energy developers are currently investigating how solar and wind might more effectively cooperate, developing hybrid solar-wind projects to capitalize on the strengths of each technology's power generation. The two technologies combined will be a better replacement for fossil fuels. A 10-megawatt solar farm will soon be built next to 73 already operational wind turbines on Australia's rolling plains to the west of the Great Dividing Range. The project is located a few hours' drive southwest of Sydney, and according to the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, a governmental organization tasked with promoting the use of renewable energy, which has invested 9.9 million Australian dollars in it, the co-location of solar and wind gives more continuous energy generation than having either technology working alone. Grid connections, site development, and permitting costs can all be reduced by placing solar and wind power facilities together. But there are other advantages as well. According to ARENA CEO Ivor Frischknecht, co-locating wind and solar projects can reduce costs associated with site development, site preparation, and clearances. Frischknecht calculates savings of up to 6 million Australian dollars by constructing the Gullen Solar Farm next to the current wind project, cutting the project's cost by a full 20%. So why should we be using wind power? In fact, why should we care about wind energy at all? Because wind power has the lowest environmental impact of any large-scale electricity source and is helping to reduce the threat of climate change. We can all agree that wind energy is a clean form of energy, and it produces electricity without negative effects like air pollution, greenhouse gases, or solid waste. Furthermore, wind energy requires almost no water for production, making it a promising alternative to burning harsh fossil fuels. Wind turbines continue to increase in size too. Today's wind turbines produce 17 times more electricity than a turbine made in 1990. On top of that, the cost of producing wind energy is dropping each year. In fact, the cost of making wind energy has dropped more than 50% in the last 6 years. And since wind is free, the operating costs for producing wind energy are nearly zero once a turbine is put up. Renewables are carbon-smart energy sources. Due to their lower carbon dioxide emissions than fossil fuels, renewable energy sources are one of the most valuable allies in the fight to achieve net zero emissions. Throughout their entire life cycles, geothermal, hydroelectric, solar, and wind power all leave only a small environmental footprint. Notably, as the minerals they are built of are mined and processed, the solar life cycle produces very little greenhouse gas emissions from photovoltaic modules and other components. Similar to other energy sources, certain pollutants are produced during the building and maintenance of wind turbine towers. Steel, concrete, fiberglass, and copper are all made using resources that contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. However, in both situations, overall emissions are considerably lower than those produced by coal and gas-fired power plants, which are responsible for 75% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of geothermal energy, power plants can adhere to the strictest clean air regulations since they produce very little nitrogen oxides, very little sulfur dioxides, and very little carbon dioxides. The average global CO2 emissions of geothermal power plants are thought to be 122 grams per kilowatt hour, or nearly 10 times lower than those of coal and petroleum. With all those benefits in mind, why aren't there more wind farms? Is there any reason why we shouldn't be harnessing wind power? Unfortunately, wind energy production does have a few drawbacks. First, the amount of energy wind can produce varies because airflow, and therefore wind power, varies based on time, location, and speed, and it's difficult to store excess electricity. There's also a visual impact and humming noise associated with wind turbines. Some people think that wind turbines are ugly and noisy, which can make it difficult to find the right place for them. Also, the wind turbine's blades may kill birds and bats, but it's important to remember that wind turbines don't account for as many wildlife casualties as cars, power lines, and high-rise buildings. And lastly, the generators, which ultimately produce the electricity, require large amounts of rare earth elements to make, such as copper. Solar panels are a more feasible choice for suburban and metropolitan areas. Buildings, schools, and commercial buildings can all have solar panels put on their roofs. At a reasonable price, they can be purchased or leased. They might even be utilized to produce electricity for upcoming high-speed transit networks. Also being created are translucent solar panels that can be retrofitted onto windows, rooftops, and even your phone, laptop, or tablet. Despite the benefits of green energy, its economic viability remains an open question. Although the use of wind and solar power has increased significantly over the past 10 years, they still only make up a small portion of the global energy generation capacity. To compete with oil, coal, and natural gas, wind and solar power must be cost-effectively stored for use when the sun isn't out and the wind isn't blowing. Additionally, consumers will need to be persuaded to switch from non-renewable energy sources by further decreasing the costs associated with manufacturing, installing, and maintaining wind and solar energy systems. Both sectors will need strong infrastructure and more private investment when government subsidies for renewable energy expire in 2020. The wind is a ubiquitous facet of nature that humans have been capturing and using for centuries. Modern windmills and turbines have allowed wind energy resources to become a major part of the global electricity mix. Wind power has been developed over the past few decades to generate enough electricity to make up significant portions of power grids worldwide. As energy efficiency continues to improve, wind power should become even more crucial for energy systems across the globe. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video and found it interesting, then make sure to leave us a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon to always be updated with the most exciting content as soon as it's uploaded. Thanks for watching. See you in another video.